I want to start out by asking all of you a question. Have you ever been in the situation where you were stuck with a life problem, a homework assignment, or a paper, and you took a break from dealing with it for hours or for days? And then you came back to look at it and realized that you weren't stuck anymore. Well, this is the situation I was in a couple of years ago. I had just graduated from high school, and as an 18-year-old, I'd been thrown out into the real world, and I was stuck with all this freedom that I had. I didn't know what I wanted out of a college education, or what I wanted to study in college, or what I wanted to do with my life. I grew up in a small suburb outside of Los Angeles, California, one of the top 10 most Asian populated areas of LA. LA is still very much segregated by racial boundaries, and as you can see from the map, I grew up in a very homogenous Asian community represented by the red. There was little diversity in my school. In fact, according to the US Census, my entire town was just 0.4% African American, 0% Native American, and just 6% Hispanic. So essentially, you could say I lived in a bubble. I grew up going to school with people who looked like me, and I didn't know people who came from other racial backgrounds with different stories to tell. What's worse is that students didn't care about discovery. Students didn't want to learn about people from outside the bubble or about current events happening outside the bubble. People only cared about getting high grades, high SAT scores, and going to great colleges. My school was known throughout our entire area for its tradition of academic excellence, which was also correlated with competitiveness. There was a very big culture of honor, in which every student had to be the best at whatever they did. Everywhere I went, there would be a story of Chinese tiger parents who could order their kids to do whatever they wanted. Thus, school, which was supposed to be a place where people discovered themselves, where people went to get a humanizing experience, became this journey on an academic treadmill, doing things solely because they would look good on college applications. I consistently felt like I had to meet some sort of societal expectation. My parents, teachers, and friends would often ask me the inevitable questions that surrounded my entire life in high school. So, where do you want to go to college? And what do you see yourself doing career wise? Back then, I would have said I wanted to be a teacher, but it didn't hold as much honor as becoming a doctor or a lawyer. In fact, teachers in my town didn't even gain a lot of respect for doing what they did. There was a huge culture of hagwons where I lived, tutoring centers outside of school where students would do most of their learning. Going to a competitive school, many parents believed students always had to be doing something, which is what propelled the entire hagwon culture. So learning didn't seem fun anymore as it should have been, and this is not a particularly healthy behavior choice for us. School followed a format of memorizing, 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 and spitting all the information back. It was as if mom and dad told me to pack my suitcase to go on a vacation the day before, and I dumped all of my clothes into my suitcase. The suitcase wouldn't close, and when I got up to leave, everything fell out. I wasn't remembering anything I was learning after a test, and nothing made a genuine connection with how I could use it with my life. I eventually got accepted to one of the best schools in the nation, NYU, and later found out I received a generous full scholarship through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So essentially, the hard work I put in at a competitive high school worked in getting me into a great college with a great scholarship, but I was completely burnt out. I'd been running on this academic treadmill for years now, lost, pretending to be someone I wasn't, and I wasn't happy. I wanted to get off the treadmill and do something else. I'd been earning all of these miles on the treadmill, and just like you want all of your airline miles to count for a free ticket, I wanted my miles to count. So, how did I end up digging myself out of this hole? My senior year, while browsing through Facebook one day, I saw an ad for a program called Global Citizen Year. Global Citizen Year is not a gap year, and it is not a freshman year of college. It is a global bridge year program connecting one experience to the next, to the next, and to the next. Global Citizen Year recruits, trains, and sends a diverse national core of high school graduates each year to Ecuador, Senegal, Brazil, India, and soon to other parts of Asia and the Middle East to live with host families and local communities while working on community like apprenticeships. I couldn't imagine a better fit for someone like me who wanted to regain my love of learning so I could make the most of college when I got there. It was almost as if I were trapped in a desert, dying of thirst until I finally saw that cool drink of water. I told the people at NYU that college would simply have to wait. Instead of preparing for my first year of college like all of my friends, I got on a plane and flew to Ecuador, a country I knew nothing about at the time. I moved into a small yellow room upstairs in a house with four seamstress sisters in the Andes Mountains while teaching environmental education and English at a local school. Instead of showing up to a college that looked like this, and trust me, when I was a senior in high school, everything my calculus teacher wrote on the board did look like this to me. I gained an experience living in a community where I normally saw sights like this, and living in the avenue of volcanoes in Ecuador. This is a volcano I lived under during my bridge year, which erupted on February 1st, 2014, and has been active ever since. During my global citizen year, the ballpark suddenly changed for me in terms of what I was learning and what I was dealing with every day. While I used to be struggling with math problems in high school, I was struggling with a whole new level of problems in Ecuador. When you turn on the water to take your nice cold bucket shower and no water comes out for a couple of days, what do you do? When your family makes discriminatory remarks towards you, what do you do? And when you're responsible for teaching a class, barely knowing the language and barely knowing classroom management, what do you do? My global citizen year can be characterized by all this craziness, but I learned so many lessons. So, to get to the main point of what I'm trying to tell you today, I saw global perspectives of education in rural Ecuador that changed my US centric perceptions of what education means and what I could potentially give back to the world as a future teacher. What I saw in Ecuador was that there were different expectations for school coming from a different place than the US. College is not a thought for most people in Guano unless you went to a big school in a big city. School was a place where people would go to read and discover themselves. In a way, it was very different than the American dream in the community where I grew up in, where you have to be better than your parents, and where in my hometown, being a teacher didn't hold as much prestige as being a doctor or a lawyer. And if your parents were doctors and lawyers already, you had to be better than that. During my spare time in Ecuador, I taught one of my host family's friends English. He would always get together with his friends and study English together with them. In this situation, education was humanizing, education was empowering. In a way, when my high school was a means to an end, education in Ecuador was just the beginning. Seeing this dramatic difference between the community I lived in Ecuador made me curious about coming back and seeing the culture of education in other communities in the US. I knew that there had to be some type of education that existed outside of my hometown. So upon coming back to the US, I packed my bags and I moved to Texas and I taught geometry, life skills, and a color guard workshop for a program called Breakthrough Collaborative. This was the door to my classroom, and as they say, everything is bigger in Texas. I tried to show my students that learning was bigger in the Lone Star State. Breakthrough's mission is twofold. They select high-achieving, low-income sixth graders and support them with summer programming taught by successful college students to get them on a college trajectory. The program is also great for college students who want to work in the field of teaching. I found myself in a majority low-income Latino community, which coming from a community outside of Los Angeles was stretching the boundaries of my comfort zone because it's almost the complete opposite of the community where I grew up. I taught at a school called Maynard New Tech High School outside of Austin, a revolutionary new type of school. They focus on STEM career education, and they have gone completely textbook free. Students work in teams, and they work on one project revolving around their literacy, math, and science classes. Over the summer when I taught, we modeled just that. Students had to do a bicycle redesign project where they had to repurpose a bicycle to fulfill a different purpose. In their math classes, they would learn how to calculate the geometry of their prototypes. They would learn how to do line graphs, for instance, to calculate break-even points if they're turning their bicycles into businesses. And in their science classes, they would build their creations. I want to share two particularly inspiring stories from my summer. One is Caitlin's story. Caitlin was a student in my math class, my advisory, and my color guard class, and I knew her pretty well. She started off the summer very shy, not being able to do a presentation in front of the class. As a teacher, it was very difficult to see my students this way. I created a day called Confidence Day, a part of our Spirit Week in which every ninth grade student came to school wearing a white t shirt and blue jeans. Makeup free, and if you saw some of these ninth grade students who had so much makeup on every day, I wanted to show these students how beauty could be real and raw. These ninth graders were vulnerable to share their own life stories during the all school assembly that day, when teachers wrote a negative word on a paper we associated with, and then a positive word while sharing our stories on how we got over our hard times. Students did the same and eventually shared their stories that day. At the end of the summer, Caitlin developed her confidence to be able to perform a color guard routine in front of 1,000 of her peers and her parents. She joined a color guard team at Manor High the following year, and performance became her thing. And as a teacher, I was incredibly proud to see her grow. Another story I want to share is a field trip I took my students on to Freescale, an engineering firm outside of Austin dedicated to creating the latest innovations in engineering. I taught in a STEM program and I wanted to show them a STEM career, something that students may or may not have thought was achievable coming from low income backgrounds. I wanted to teach them this agency, that what they were doing had an impact in the real world, and I had the support of hundreds of engineers to help my students in building autonomous vehicles for a race they had against each other that day. I realized that this was what true education was all about, and I found it so much more fulfilling than using my education to merely fill up suitcases as I had before my entire life. So, as an 18-year-old, I'd found my love. My personal learning style was stimulated similar to the same participatory way I tried to teach and engage my students, and how it was different than the type of education of learning that was dumped on me in school before. And discovering this in myself and by creating this spark in my students, that's what ultimately makes me want to be a teacher in the long run. At NYU, I am paving my own path, and I'm guided by my own set of questions in my participatory learning. I find myself interested in Hawaiian culture and wanting to teach in Hawaii after college. And instead of reading about Hawaiian culture and reading about Hawaii in books, I find myself paving my own path, going to Hawaii over the summer to take classes at a local university there. This past summer, I woke up hiking the Lanikai pillboxes. I went to school. I worked at a lemonade stand with locals. I ended my day seeing sunsets like these at Sharks Cove on my way back from North Shore to Honolulu. Next year, I will be at NYU Buenos Aires. The path isn't laid out in front of me, but I will write my own. Taking a break to live life as my 18-year-old self has made all the difference in the world. I spent most of my life in school at this point. And the way I see it, how can I make life decisions if I haven't even gotten the chance to live? If I hadn't had global experience before coming to college, I would have never found meaning in my education. And with education being such a huge investment in time and money today, I would have lost my purpose. I would have had no meaning for what I was spending all of my time and money doing. Seeing different educational perspectives allowed me to find the ultimate purpose of why I want to be a teacher, and that is the purpose that guides my everyday education here at NYU. Currently, I'm a sophomore in NYU's Global Liberal Studies program. I'm concentrating in contemporary culture and creative production, and also studying education in Steinhardt and Spanish in College of Arts and Science. Even though I'm back in my formal education, I'm not running inside on a treadmill. I've taken a break. I've gained a further depth behind my education. I've figured myself out, and now I'm running outside in the world as a lifelong learner, always trying to figure out my next path. Thank you.